broke our all-time sales record, and it's all thanks to my nephew, Skylar.
Bro, it's Sky.
After my brother made me hire Sky, I switched us to First Bank to make up for him. Now business is better than ever.
No matter the reason, switching to First Bank can help your business grow.
Good morning, Colorado Realtors. Thanks for joining us for this special presentation. I am really happy and honored to invite these two gentlemen that are here with me today to be here with us and perform this webinar. It is absolutely fascinating. I had the opportunity to see it a couple of months ago when they did it for a different group and saw immediately that we as a State Realtor Association needed to get these guys down here to give us a little bit of this information on what's going on in the residential marijuana grow realm. If you guys haven't heard, marijuana is legal in the state of Colorado. And so there are a lot of real estate implications to that. With me today, I've got a special agent in charge of the Denver office, Kevin Merrill, who's with the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. And then I have Detective Adam Hughes, who's with the Colorado Springs Police Department. And these guys have been living in this world of legalized marijuana in Colorado and seen some of the implications of our state law changes over the last several years. And so we've got a PowerPoint that they're going to walk through and show you guys what those implications have been when it comes to the residential components of marijuana grows. So I know it'll be incredibly useful information for you as realtors, for your clients, colleagues, and so please feel free to share this video after it's been recorded here live today. Throughout their presentation, the PowerPoint lasts about 35-40 minutes, and then when that's done, we're going to take a quick break for about 5 or 6 minutes, and we'll go through some of the questions that you guys send in. So during the presentation, if you have questions that you'd like us to try and get to, you can email them to questions@coloradorealtors.com. And I will go through some of those questions with them after the break, and we'll spend whatever time we need getting through those. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Agent Merrill and Detective Hughes and let them walk through the PowerPoint presentation, and I'll be back after the break to help them answer some of the questions that you guys might have. So thanks for joining us. Questions@coloradorealtors.com is the email address, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you, gentlemen, both.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know today that our presentation is not a pro or anti-marijuana presentation. We are simply here to discuss what the Colorado laws in regards to Amendment 20 and Amendment 64 have done as they relate to indoor residential grows and some of the hazards that have been created by that. So that's really our presentation, is more about being informative and educating those who come in touch with a home, whether you're a utility company, a mortgage company, insurance, HOA, or just a homeowner yourself. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. If everyone knows Amendment 20, it passed in Colorado back in 2000. It is for medical marijuana, and it allowed patients to grow up to 6 plants with exceptions. And that exception is really what's causing the problem here. It's more of a loophole. The exceptions allow currently for doctors to write for certain patients recommendations as high as 99 plants. So that's why we're starting to see in these home grows in excess of 100, 200, as high as 1,000 plants per household. As you can see, in January 2016, there was almost 108,000 medical marijuana patients in the state. Interesting to note that in December 2013, 5,300 of those patients actually had plant count recommendations between 50 and 99 plants. That was 5% of all of the medical marijuana patients. And literally within a 2-year time span, that has increased to 8% of all patients. Now 8,200 patients have plant count recommendations between 50 and 99 plants. And that's really been attributed to the influx of East Coast-based drug trafficking organizations that have seen this loophole and have decided to exploit that here in Colorado.
And you'll see on the screen a sample of a medical marijuana registry paperwork that is most commonly seen when we go to houses to do compliance checks and make sure that everybody has their proper paperwork. It's commonly marked for a pain for neck and back. There's other ailments that people list on there as documented by the physician that they go and see. And when we see this paperwork, it's usually marked as high as 99 plants, usually 33 ounces, and that's for edibles, oils, tinctures, etc. It's not for smokable marijuana at that point. That's simply for the purpose of making those other ointments.
And it's important to note that most of these recommendations for the elevated plant counts are really being written by a handful of doctors who are charging as much as $500 for each recommendation of 99 plants. So as you can see, the cardholder numbers and how they've somewhat stayed stable throughout the first quarter of 2016, currently at 107,000. So let's do the math. Talk about those 8,200 patients with elevated plant counts. Let's just go with a low number here, saying that they each had the authorization to grow 50 plants. That would be 410,000 plants for those 8,200 patients that they could grow. MED is the Marijuana Enforcement Division for Colorado. MED only regulates dispensaries and grow facilities that support dispensaries. MED does not regulate any of the indoor marijuana grows conducted by individuals. But recently we determined from MED how many plants they're currently monitoring in their system for all of the dispensaries that exist throughout the entire state of Colorado. And that number was at 758,000. So we have 8,200 patients that produce more than half of what the dispensaries produce and use for the entire state. That's a rather alarming number. So a typical harvest is about every 90 days with adequate growing skills. 8,200 patients harvesting 1 pound and a marijuana plant yielding 1 pound is a very low number. We see some of these plants yielding as high as 2 and 3 pounds per plant. But if those 8,200 patients harvested 1 pound of marijuana for every 90 days, that would be 1.64 million pounds of marijuana per year for those 8,200 patients.
So Amendment 64 allows residents to grow 6 plants per adult 21 years of age living within a residence. There's, once again, some other loopholes written into Amendment 64 that are not in Amendment 20. And one of them, it allows growers to keep all the marijuana and every derivative from those 6 plants. So once again, you're legally allowed to carry out on the street up to 1 ounce. But if you're growing in your house and you have, say, 6 plants and each plant produces 1 to 2 pounds each, you're allowed to keep the derivative from each of those plants. That also allows residents to assist another person in possessing, growing, processing, or transporting their 6 plants under Amendment 64.
So just so you see where Colorado is, there are currently 24 states that have laws legalizing medical marijuana. But keep in mind that 18 of those 24 states have very limited access or have only CBD, this is cannabinoid oil restrictions for marijuana. That CBD oil is generally less than 1% THC as the active ingredient. It's not; those states are not involved in legalizing smokable amounts of marijuana. The 4 states you see listed there, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, have also legalized recreational marijuana. In Washington, a medical marijuana patient could grow up to 4 plants without registering with the state, and 15 plants would be the max if they registered with the state. They have no private recreational grows in Washington. Oregon is a limit of 4 marijuana plants per household. No matter how many people live in the house, only 4 plants could be grown in the household. Alaska with the restriction of 6. So you can really tell that in Colorado with 99 plants, that is way beyond the norm for these states that have legalized marijuana. There have been attempts, successful attempts by cities and counties to come up with local ordinances to limit the size of these residential grows.
So there's no regulation by the Marijuana Enforcement Division in the residential grows. Individuals and organized groups coming here to exploit the lax environment, and as Agent Merrill has explained, a lot of these groups are organized drug trafficking organizations that have come here from east of Colorado. They're here and they grow large amounts of marijuana produced in home grows, and the amounts of marijuana they're all going to out-of-state markets. It's not staying here in the state of Colorado, in which return with the home grows, there's also no tax revenue generated for the state. So how much does a home grow produce? The average yield per plant is between 1 to 3 pounds. We've seen more, we've seen a little bit less. But the growing cycles in there, we don't want to call them plants anymore, they're trees, and you'll see some of the photos coming up that they're between 6, 8, I've seen them upwards of 9 to 10 feet tall. They 3 or 4 growing cycles per year. The usual growing cycle is about 12 weeks, and the marijuana produced today has a much higher THC content than back in the 80s when the average THC content was around 4%. The Mexican marijuana, which we used to get, contains between 6 and 11%. Now we actually supply Mexico with our marijuana from Colorado. Colorado grown marijuana contains between 20 and 30% THC, and the hash oil and the concentrates reach as high as 60% THC or higher. We've seen upwards of 80% reached. So a plant produces approximately 1/2 pound to 1 pound, or 8 ounces to 16 ounces at harvest. The plants can be harvested approximately 4 times per year. And if we look at it, we'll break it down into joints, into marijuana joints. If we look at it, we see 1 ounce approximately is 60 marijuana joints. And a marijuana joint consists of approximately 1/2 gram of marijuana. There's 8 ounces per plant at 4 times a year is 32 ounces a year for just 1 plant. At 12 plants, it's 384 ounces, 24 pounds, or over 23,000 joints in a year. 36 plants, we have 1,152 ounces, 72 pounds, or 69,120 joints. 99 plants, which is what we most commonly see, 3,168 ounces, almost 200 pounds, and 190,000 joints plus in a year. It's a lot of marijuana to smoke. So some of these are photos that we've seen in the home grows. You can see on the screen there's several what we call tiers or drying racks, and hanging from those is approximately 30 to 35 pounds of refined marijuana. Usually spends about 3, 4, upwards of 5 days to dry once it is harvested. What you can't see below were boxes that were filled with about 20 to 30 pounds worth of marijuana that had already dried and was ready to be packaged up and shipped out.
And I would draw your attention to the back of the photo there where you see like that Perma-R. That's just reflective boarding that they put in there to help with the grow lights and the grow cycle. You see that venting, that's to help vent out the smells and the temperature there in those grows. So you can already see the damage being done by these grows inside the residences as the residences are being severely modified. And we'll have many more pictures that cover the damage to these homes.
So in this photo here, there's approximately 100 pounds of processed marijuana that came out of a Colorado residence, and it was derived from 60 marijuana plants. all of that was shipped out of state.
So, what we typically have, at a smaller scale of organizations, let's just say 6 people come to Colorado from the East Coast. They all go to a doctor. The first thing they do is they come to Colorado is they go to DMV and they get themselves a driver's license so they can establish residency. Then they go to a doctor and find a doctor that's willing to write for 99 plants. Plus, they can also grow 6 recreational marijuana plants as long as they're 21 years or older. So now the 6 of those people can legally grow up to 630 plants in a residence.
So the investment inside of a home grow these days, this has been, between going to, several different grow stores throughout Colorado. Grow equipment is set up and cost for, a 50 to 99 plant grow equals roughly around between $30,000 and $50,000. And mind you, when we're talking with these people, we ask, where do you get this money to come from? Usually it's a sale of some kind of a property. And on the other side, these people are not employed. So coming up with this money, it's mind-boggling to us. The average kilowatt usage peaks at around 10,000 to 25,000 kilowatts per month during certain times of the growing cycle. We've seen upwards of 60 and 70,000 per month in residences. A typical house in Colorado is between 500 and 800 kilowatt hours per month.
So you can imagine those are quite hefty bills in addition to the money for the equipment. The utility bills run in the several $1,000s per month range. So again, talking about those 6 people processing the 1 pound of marijuana per plant in the growing cycle, 630 pounds of cannabis every 90 days, or those 6 people producing over 2,500 pounds of marijuana per year from just 6 people. If this group was able to sell their marijuana here locally within Colorado, the average rate's between $1,800 and $2,000 per pound, but they would make over $5 million per year. If they go ahead and take the extra risk of transporting it to the East Coast, which involves extra labor and certainly the potential for being arrested and having the load intercepted, $4,000 is a low amount. We've seen prices as high as $6,000 per pound, but they would make over $10 million a year, just these 6 people. So well over $1 million, almost $1.5 million per person per year.
Some of the houses that we commonly come across, they range in, in prices from $150,000 upwards of $700,000+, for just a house. This particular house, this gentleman had over 465 plants inside the basement area. It was a brand new house in a newer subdivision, and he was growing it for, he was listed as a caregiver and growing for other patients for edibles, oils, and tinctures.
So the effect on Colorado's communities, certainly we're seeing plenty of houses when we execute search warrants where children are present. You have to deal with the CO2 levels that are elevated, as well as mold and other hazards inside the house. The physical damage to the home certainly can dramatically affect the home values of these residences. And then certainly there are dangerous conditions created for first responders. We'll have some pictures of that. And then certainly the power and water resources of our natural resources that are being consumed by these large grows.
So we'll start out with some photos from basement grows that we see, and these are just some of the hundreds that we've come across within the state of Colorado. But these are, you can see on the screen that these plants are upwards of 6 to 8 feet tall just in basements. They were walled with mylar sheeting. All the lighting you can see above them. You can see the filtration system at the bottom corner. This also another basement grow, 10-foot ceilings inside this basement. He had several rooms broke off for different growing cycles, and here he started his cloning and his vegetative cycle. You can see the venting hanging down from the ceilings there. And he had all of that stuff running up through subfloors into other rooms to vent out of that particular room. Grows in garages, a very common occurrence that we see. Usually in the grows, they'll be in the garages, they'll be in basements, they'll be in bedrooms. But these photos here in the garage, still typical lighting. The platform's down in the bottom corner with the water filtration, water system running underneath to help all the plants so they don't have to do it manually. Then you get some of the other plants with the entanglement hazards that we come across common. The plants are growing right next to each other. And in order to keep them upright, they're using tape and strings, other methods to keep them growing straight up. The commercial grade AC units is a very common occurrence. Most houses in the state come with at least one, sometimes two AC units for the residents, depending on the size. But we're coming across, 1,500, 2,000 square foot houses that have 3 or 4 AC units in it. You can see on the top left the venting that's running up from there. There were 4 commercial grade AC units inside that residence, which helped cool the massive grow that was below in the basement. That was enclosed in a garage. The other ones for outbuildings, you'll see 3 or 4 of those at a time on there. It's a very common thing, and they're running 24/7. It doesn't matter if it's 3 degrees outside or 103 outside. Those AC units are continuously running to maintain the temperature within the marijuana grow.
So certainly the electrical systems, if you see the picture on the right with all the white devices, those are called ballast. Each grow light requires 1 ballast. So those ballasts are pretty heavy, probably around 30 pounds. They store electricity for a rather long time. So when we go in to dismantle a grow, we have to cut the power and let those things sit for a little while so they're cooling down. But you can see all of the electrical wiring that's done. None of this is permitted. None of this is done mostly is ever done by an electrical contractor who has certifications. These are just people who, somehow learned a trade from somebody and are altering the electrical systems. And this is where most of the fires start.
So more of the altered electrical systems, once again, these are not registered with the through electricians or licensed electricians, and they're not registered or licensed through regional departments either. And they just put everything together and hope that it works. You can see timing systems for the watering and for the lighting as well.
And these places are operating usually off a 200 amp service, and so sometimes the subjects upgrade the electrical service, but often they don't. So which causes outages of power, blown transformers. Certainly a cost that's passed on to the consumers.
More of the lighting issues that we come across and entanglement hazards. There's the lighting hanging from there. That was a grow that was taken out. All the wiring just hanging down. Of course, over to my right, there's more lighting and ballasts hanging on the walls to set up for the grow inside that particular basement area. Most common that we see in all the houses that we're entering these days are black mold issues. And you can see going up the stairs from the basement up into the main living area, that entire wall is covered in black mold. If we remove the insulation in the basement, you can see the black mold on the plywood that was soaking wet. More damage that we're seeing, the top left with the tan siding. You can see the mold and other fluids leaking out from inside that brand new residence where a grow was. The bigger picture to the right of it is the same house. You can also see the siding of the house starting to warp. I like to call it house bleeding. It's something that we were starting to see this winter. I don't know if it was because of cooler temperatures and the warmer temperatures and humidity from inside the house, but the condensation and stuff was built up in between these walls, and it starts to leak out the siding, causing that brown substance to ease out there. And what you can't see on the photos is the massive warping that's being done to the sides of these houses. You can see in the top of January 2015 where that siding started to bleed and started to warp, and by March 1st, it had almost doubled. Some of the DIY venting that we most commonly see, we can drive around in neighborhoods and see the flash venting that's coming out the siding in garages, up above bedroom windows. That's not a common occurrence. That's not something that's put in there by the construction company. These are additional vents that are put in by people that are growing. You can see that they cut out the stairs from a basement that led to an upstairs living area, and causing structural damage to the house, most definitely, just for venting. Exterior damage, you can see the holes drilled into the side of a house. That was a rental house, and they drilled holes in there to just let the air, the venting from the grow inside the living room in that particular house, and just some more of the bleeding coming out from the siding.
And again, one of the hazards for first responders is obviously they get called when there's a fire. You can see in the picture on the left, there's actually was a fire in this panel box. That looks like they were able to put it out themselves. But again, this wiring, talk to any electrician, this is not the way you would wire something. It's not done well. And this is where these house fires is not only a damage to the people in the house that's the grow is located, but also the neighbors, if they're, the house next to them is able to catch fire.
Some of the most common things that we're seeing recently, and it's another hazard for first responders as well, is something called hot tapping. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a tubing there with some wires running from it. These particular individuals dug about 3 feet into the ground, found the main line, and cut into it, and they spliced, bypassing the power to ultimately steal the electricity. So law enforcement and also the utility company couldn't tell exactly how much power they were using. And the other photos, you can see the other bypasses that they've connected straight to the boxes to bypass electricity so they don't have to pay so much every single month.
And so obviously those costs, if power is being stolen and it's 10 to 15,000, 20,000 kilowatt hours per month being utilized, those costs are passed on to consumers.
Some more of the hazards that we come across, and when we say hazards for first responders, we're talking about firefighters, EMS, police, anybody that has to go into one of these houses, maybe for a rescue, for a fire. Imagine it being dark and coming across all of these electrical lines hanging from ceilings, coming out of walls. With all the heavy equipment that everybody carries now to go into these houses, it obviously becomes an extreme entanglement hazard. Some of the other hazards that we see, this particular house, they cut out the subfloor and they just put Mylar sheeting down to run the venting out. Imagine being a first responder and going into one of these houses when it's dark, trying to help somebody out, and you don't see and you step in one of those places, you're dropping about 8 to 10 feet straight down into an unknown. Some more of the venting that came out of that subfloor straight into walls into a garage. The one with the stairs, they just removed that section of the stairs there. During the search warrant, we had to jump from about the 3rd step down to about the 4th or 5th step down just to get into the basement where the marijuana grow actually was. Other hazards are the butane and propane explosions. As of July 1st, 2015, the state of Colorado passed a law for people to, making it illegal for people to not be able to extract marijuana to make the oils and all of that through the use of a butane or a gas method. Some of the other things that we most commonly see in all the grows are the propane tanks, which used to generate for the carbon dioxide machines and that within the grows. You'll also see the one on the bottom right. That was an extraction table that they had set up and were getting everything prepared to extract marijuana within the residence.
And then you have, for whatever reason, when we go into these houses, they have pesticides and fertilizer. None of these containers are ever marked, so you're not sure what is what. But you know, those kind of containers are sitting close to open, exposed electrical wiring, so that's certainly a hazard for first responders. This was from more of a marijuana business. They literally are pumping their waste into the city water system, along with the chemicals and pesticides. A lot of these pesticides are not even regulated by EPA or approved by EPA. A lot of them come in from foreign countries. And the excessive water usage are certainly the part of the environmental concerns for these marijuana grows.
This is an excessive power usage from a FLIR camera. I'll let you all guess which house has the marijuana grow in it.
So we can often, in the wintertime, if there's a fresh snow of 4 to 5 inches, you could somewhat be sure that there was a grow inside of a house if that house quickly after a snowfall actually had no snow on the roof and everyone else did. Most recently in January 2016, this kind of is a case that proves everything we've kind of been discussing. It was about a $700,000 home in the city of Larkspur, or town of Larkspur in Douglas County. Had a couple of people recently from Florida. They actually had a plant count that allowed them to grow 58 plants in the basement. The fire, again, as I stated earlier, started in the basement where the ballasts are that control the lights, and then burnt that house basically down to the ground. Fortunately, it was the wintertime, because this house was in a heavily wooded area close to the forest, and if it had been, during the windy season or the dry season, I could have the flames were, 20 feet in the air, and this could have easily started a major fire. Again, some more pictures of how everything got charred. So you've heard us talk about these East Coast-based organizations. They're basically come here to exploit Colorado's perceived lax environment on enforcement of marijuana laws. So when they come here, they're looking to set up multiple grows and multiple houses, and it's not uncommon for them to buy or rent 4 or 5 homes in the same neighborhood right next to each other. If they're renting, they're willing to pay inflated prices. So if the rent says $2,000 a month, they're okay with paying $4,000 to $6,000 a month. They will often pay that rent in cash, and they have no problems paying for 1 year in advance, all in cash. And the reason they want to do that is because they do not want the homeowner to have a reason to come by the house to see what damage is being done by the people operating the grow inside. All of these homes are protected with sophisticated security systems, as well as firearms. There isn't a search warrant that we don't go on where these places are heavily protected with firearms. And they're not really protecting themselves from law enforcement. They're mainly protecting themselves from other criminal organizations who might engage in home invasion robberies to steal either the plants themselves or the final product, or even cash derived from the sale of those plants. So we've got some independent brokers that are helping these organizations from the East Coast find these grows. They're assisting with out-of-state buyers as well as renters. We've seen it across the board. There's white, Cuban, Eurasian, Asian organized crime groups that are out here exploiting this. And again, all of this marijuana that's being grown by these organizations is being transported back out of Colorado back to the East Coast for higher profits. This is the case that we recently did in Cotopaxi, Colorado, currently in federal court undergoing judicial proceedings.
This one here is this was a violent Miami fugitive operating a grow house in Colorado Springs as of January 2016. This all started with a phone call from the U.S. Marshal Service, they were executing a nationwide arrest warrants as part of this drug cartel based out of Miami. I received a phone call reference some marijuana inside this residence. Once I arrived, you could see approximately 30 pounds of refined marijuana in packages in the basement, in Ziploc packages that were ready to, they were all weighed out, ready to be boxed up. Upon obtaining a search warrant, I was able to open up the boxes that you see on the screen, and the unique way that they had these packaged ready for shipping, they had cardboard boxes with spray glue adhesive and packaging tape. They put all of the packaged marijuana in a box, sealed it up, sprayed it with glue adhesive and the tape, put it inside another box. They did that 3 times. It took about 10 to 15 minutes to open up each box, and it wasn't until you get through the last layer that you could actually smell the marijuana. So you can see the extent that these organizations will go to in order to hide the marijuana and to ship it out, whether it be in a vehicle, a rental vehicle, or U-Haul, through the U.S. Postal Service, UPS, or FedEx.
So, based on current investigations that we're doing, we know that just in El Paso County, that the estimated value of those known grow houses exceeds $51 million. So, what would the impact on that residential market be if and when these homes are have marijuana grow seized from them, and those homes are left on the market in the dilapidated conditions that they currently exist?
Imagine some of the houses that we're coming across that are full of mold and everything else. I just recently received an estimate from a person who has a rental home and lives out of state, and every single room inside the entire house had black mold in it, and he received estimates of over $10,000 just to clean up and to refurbish his house just to get it back to its original state.
So along with these East Coast-based groups, these people are not just entrepreneurs in the marijuana business, although that's one of their more significant things. These people are involved in poly-drug trafficking, credit card skimming, mortgage fraud, insurance fraud, Medicaid. We also have some human smuggling from Cuba, and probably the most prolific other crime, other than the credit card skimming, is the home invasions and assaults. And again, these are other criminal organizations that, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where these grows exist and try to figure out when they're harvesting. And usually right after harvest is when these homes are most vulnerable to being home invaded and having their products stolen or their cash stolen. We have a video here. You won't be able to hear the sound, but before we start it, let me set it up a little bit. This was in Pueblo, Colorado. The video is actually from the security cameras at the residence, and you will actually see 4 people coming in. They're individuals, 2 male, 2 female. You won't be able to tell that on the video, but they will be coming in from the upper left corner through that gate. The owner of the house had the legal right to grow marijuana in his house, but obviously these criminal organization decided that they were going to go ahead and try to rob him. So here's the video. And you can see the last person actually has a big backpack, hoping to walk away with whatever they were going to steal.
And what you can't, I don't know if you're able to hear it or not, but they're also yelling, police, police. They are not police officers.
So fortunately in that video, no one was hurt, even though they exchanged quite a bit of gunfire, other than the dog who they had shot first. But inside, the individual in that house actually had his family there, and he was armed as well to protect himself. The 4 individuals were later identified and have since been arrested and prosecuted.
So at this time, we're going to take a short 5-minute break and give everybody a chance to put some questions in. I believe there's a link down at the bottom of your screen to email in any questions that you might have for Kevin and I, and we'll be happy to try and answer everything that we can. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jamie Richards. I'm the Director of Professional Development here at the Colorado Association of Realtors. Thank you for participating in today's webcast. We are now taking a short break. Viewers are encouraged to join the conversation by submitting questions to questions@coloradorealtors.com. When we return from break, we will address as many questions that time will allow. Did you know that today's recording will be posted on our archived events and can be watched again at your convenience? You can find any of our archived events on our live stream page. To receive automatic updates for our posted videos, as well as future events, follow us on Livestream by clicking the green follow button on your screen. Be sure to register on coloradorealtors.com for any events you plan to attend so we can gauge the interest in various topics and contact you if any last-minute changes may occur. If you have a suggestion for a webcast topic or feedback about our program, please send us an email to profdev@coloradorealtors.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now stretch your legs and enjoy the break. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you guys found that informative. I think that PowerPoint presentation really is a little bit mind-boggling. And of course, you know, there's two sides to the issue. Our voters have passed both Amendment 20 and Amendment 64, and so obviously the will of the Colorado voters has you know, pushed this forward. And so now it's just a matter of, from a property rights standpoint, protecting, you know, assets, protecting the public, and that's what some of these, that's the intent of the messaging here, is to just be aware of kind of what's going on or what can occur in residential grow facilities that really, in some of those extreme cases, are absolutely commercial uses, and they do cause danger to the neighborhood, and can certainly have a negative impact on the value of property owners there. So, as I suspected, we have a ton of questions, and we're going to kind of, you know, get through as many of these as I can. Let me just start here. First one is, are there tests currently available to identify homes where grows have occurred? Chemical residue tests and that sort of thing. I'll get, either one of you have any response to that?
Currently, there are no tests to do in homes for residential grows.
It would just be a mold test that you know, might be able to notice. And certainly, if some of the structural defects in the homes that have been created by the grows still exist, and any tampering with the electrical system, you know.
Hire a professional contractor or remediation company to come in and assess the home.
Yeah, if you've got mold, then it's going to have to be remediated professionally. Particularly some of the mold examples that we saw pictures of, which are just really mind-boggling, I think. But yeah, in terms of other tests, I mean, there's certainly, you can test for chemicals if people are bringing in herbicides or pesticides for the purposes of growing. There are tests that can accommodate you know, those sources. But generally speaking, if you've got particularly an extensive grow facility, or even a simple grow facility where modifications have been made to plumbing, modifications have been made to electrical, there could be the presence of mold from standing water from some of these indoor hydroponic grow systems. Definitely something you want to get a professional to address in terms of testing. So next question here has to do with property disclosures. Does the seller have to disclose if they had a small grow room in the basement which has been dismantled? I'll take that one because it's kind of a legal question. The answer is no. Marijuana in and of itself, the growth, use, and possession of marijuana in a property is not a mandatory seller property disclosure item. I would say that there are degrees, though. Somebody that has a few plants in the basement, again, absent having that homeowner made modifications to the plumbing or electrical that weren't done pursuant to permit, or if there is the presence of mold, those kinds of things, those are all mandatory disclosures, regardless of whether those were done to grow marijuana or grow tomatoes or for some other use in the basement. So those would be mandated disclosures. But beyond that, marijuana in and of itself is not. Obviously, when you see extreme situations like these gentlemen have shown some pictures of, which are more common than probably any of us realize, those would be disclosure items. If you've got black mold coming through the siding on the outside of the home, that's a pretty clear seller disclosure in that case. So,
And just to add on the scope of this problem, we're not talking of a few hundred homes. This problem exists all throughout the entire state of Colorado. We're talking about several thousand, multiple thousand homes within Colorado that have these large residential grows inside of them.
yeah, it's a significant number of homes that this is impacting. Next question is kind of a two-part question. What are the proper procedures when you find a grow house in a rental?
For people within residential neighborhoods, we ask that you just contact your local law enforcement agency to report it. Sometimes there's code violations that code enforcement can come out and deal with, but other than that, it would be more of a patrol response depending on the level, but definitely contact your local law enforcement agency.
Yeah, I would not recommend engaging the homeowner where the suspected grow might be. That you just never know. That could get into a heated debate or argument, and so it would be just best to reach out to local law enforcement.
And I would also recommend don't contact if it's a rental property, don't contact the homeowner because they may be associated to it as well.
Yeah, so address it with law enforcement when you find out that's going on. And if it's an illegal grow operation, if it's not properly permitted, then obviously law enforcement can take measures to try and shut that down. When you find it, the question is why when they find a grow house, the police, somebody calls onto the police, say they won't do anything or they don't come and investigate it. I'll let Detective Hughes take that.
Sometimes, depending on where you're at in the state of Colorado, but the resources are very thin for law enforcement agencies right now. So we just don't have the manpower to go out and investigate every single complaint that we get. A lot of it is a patrol response, and because it's a non-emergency, they might document it and send it on to an investigative unit within that department. But we just do not have the resources. We're talking in the hundreds and thousands of homes throughout Colorado that are running into these issues.
Yeah. Yeah, so it is a matter of resources, no doubt about it. Another question I've got here is, are you seeing big residential grows in resort areas? Obviously, Colorado has an awful lot of resort areas. Agent Merrill?
I would say that no neighborhood is safe from having these grows in there. It just depends on the financial resources of an organization. Like I said, we've seen them in $700,000 plus homes. It's just no neighborhood is protected. I don't think it's just a lower income neighborhood where these exist. These exist, on big ranches with significant outbuildings sometimes, on acreage. We are running into some issues in the counties where people are on wells. If someone's renting, especially, and it's a residential well, not an agricultural well, certainly a lot of people can be negatively impacted by the water usage of those wells.
Sure. Another question we've got here, again, related to methods of cleaning and remediation to get the mold out. Mold remediation is going to be a professional contractor. If you want to clean out a home properly, it's not going to be just a matter of a homeowner, cutting out sections of drywall, particularly if it's really permeated the insulation and gotten into other areas. I would definitely have a homeowner consult with a professional mold remediation expert. Another question here is, how do we get Colorado marijuana laws repealed or severely modified? I would sign a petition to do that. This is not intended to be a political discussion one way or another. This is supposed to be an informative discussion. In terms of having laws repealed or modified, it's going to be a matter of contacting your legislators or your legislators and letting them know that this is something that they're concerned about. I would say that there are some potentially obvious areas that this could be addressed in terms of limiting or not allowing 99 plants per patient. It's just such an excessive number per patient that one could argue that there's not necessarily a medical tangent to that. And so there may be some ways to get in touch with your legislator in each respective area and try and get a little bit of a push there. But Again, this is meant to be informational and to try and help you guys inform homeowners and know what some of the things you're looking for in the event that you're working with clients and looking at homes, or that you own property and you have tenants in a property, or that you're managing property and you have tenants in there. So any tips for knowing what to look for in a neighborhood, et cetera, when taking out buyers? She gives an example here of, she had a home under contract in a neighborhood, and they got the HOA docs and found out there was a grow house a couple of doors down. Are there any other tips to regulate with rentals, which are greatly appreciated? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Tips to regulate?
Tips to
Identify?
To identify if
okay.
you're.
Tips to identify, commonly seen, the DIY venting, as you saw in some of the slides. Those are common giveaway. The other one is that skunk odor that you smell in that particular street. And sometimes that odor permeates through, several blocks, depending on the size of the grow. Some of the other tips are out-of-state plates, people coming and going from the residences at all times of the night. Sometimes you won't see anybody there during the day, but you'll see them there at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. They might leave at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's actually living there. That's just where the grow is, and that's just where they come at particular times to maintain and try to keep out of the eye of other neighbors within the neighborhood.
But generally, the smell in the DIY venting is the most recognizable to see.
Unless you can fly overhead and see the roof lit up.
Yeah. We also see there's been several times that I'll drive through neighborhoods of known grows, and especially after a harvest, you'll see the black trash bags out at the street, and there might be, the stems and the leaves might be sticking out from them because they cut it down and they package up and just letting your local garbage collection agency, they come and pick it all up.
Yeah, and so and then with respect to your part of the question about regulating with rentals, I think what you're getting at is how do you, if you own property and you're going to rent to a tenant, you have, as a property owner, you have a very broad latitude to control what activities, and even a responsibility to control what activities take place on property that you own and that you're renting to third parties. And so you can control that via the lease document by prohibiting the use, possession, and growth of marijuana. Even though it is legal at state level, it is illegal